Great reporting, you guys. Blow us away again and again, you and the team there. Is this an AI spend story? Is this an Oracle story, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, and data centers are difficult to build. What we're saying is very specific. The Abilene, Texas site is kind of the flagship data center as part of Project Stargate, right? Which we've talked endlessly about, the wider initiative to get compute for OpenAI. The situation is that it's a 1,000 acre site where some of the data center is up and running, some is still being built. And Oracle had an agreement with Crusoe, the developer, and with OpenAI to go from 1.2 gigawatts of capacity to 2 gigawatts. But they've decided not to take on that additional capacity. And so what has happened, we understand from sources, is that Nvidia has kind of acted like a bit of a broker in the situation to make sure that the planned expansion has a tenant. And they have introduced Meta into the mix. And so there are early talks happening between Meta and Crusoe, who's the developer, the builder of the data center site, to take on that additional bit. So the existing stuff is still there. Oracle's still using it, but clearly, the way that markets reacted, that there is going to be a deeper look at the specifics here.
And at NVIDIA taking on that role of finding a tenant, because it's in NVIDIA's best interest to have this data center up and running with NVIDIA's products inside.
So our understanding from sources is that what happened is NVIDIA paid Crusoe about $150 million. It was basically a deposit to ensure that whatever happens with the expansion to go from 1.2 gigawatts to 2 gigawatts, whoever ends up being the tenant or leasing that capacity, it's NVIDIA GPUs that are in it and not AMD's. And so I guess a part of the market reaction where actually NVIDIA fell after the report, right? But so did AMD. It's kind of blocking AMD to having its tech in that site. Remember that Meta has agreements with both AMD and NVIDIA long-term for compute. But that's kind of the mechanics more so of what's happened in this circumstance.
CoreWeave shares also took a leg lower on this report, Ed. They were higher today, and then now they're down by 3.3%. Those neocloud companies, what could this? What could your story, along with some colleagues, what could this tell about those neoclouds?
Yeah, so I'm not going to I'm going to be careful not to give a definitive causal link, right? But remember that a part of CoreWeave's story was to take on some of the capacity and some of the compute demand that the hyperscalers couldn't perform themselves. Oracle also saw some of that benefit, but basically, CoreWeave is running compute. And demand for its offering is running beyond that. So generally, this seems to be a reaction where if you see a story about a high-profile data center site that is kind of going off track, and maybe we can get into some more of the specifics of why we think it's going off track. In aggregate, the market's looking at going, maybe this build-out doesn't have the momentum that we thought it did, or as we said at the top of the conversation, right, building these data centers is very difficult, let alone capital intensive.
But is Oracle in trouble?
So we think that part of what the reason for not moving forward with the expansion, and again, it's an expansion, right? It was to go from 1.2 gigawatts to 2 gigawatts, from 1.2 to 2 gigawatts, is that Oracle has a lot of other projects. There is still a commitment for Oracle and OpenAI to do 4.5 gigawatts across multiple sites. And our understanding is like that bigger picture initiative carries forward. There are other sites outside of Texas that many of the names that we're talking about see as more viable. Maybe they're easier to build. You can build them more quickly. The conditions are better. The labor availability is all a factor. What we do know is that on that Abilene site, in the existing data center that's already online, there was some downtime in January where the weather conditions literally were impacting and causing outages on that site. And so we believe that actually there was some tension in the relationship between Oracle and Crusoe. Now, I need to say, both companies issued statements and responses to our reporting, both Oracle and Crusoe, and both said that they're proud of the relationship. The relationship continues to move forward, and they're working together, on a number of different projects. But, Oracle is also a focus for investors
Yeah.
because of its credit profile and the leverage that it's taken on to do this.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that in recent months. Ed, I don't want to put you on the spot to make any predictions here, but
Sure.
This is obviously a single event that's getting a lot of attention, that's moving many stocks. Could this happen in another instance? These data centers are attempting to be built all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot in the context of forecasting energy demand, right? You know, I go back to it time and time again, but PJM and its revised forecasts, because a lot of what's out there is on paper. They are announced projects. They aren't actually drawing power from the grid. There is no concrete in the ground. But again, you know, Oracle has a much broader agreement to service OpenAI with compute, 4.5 gigawatts of it. Our understanding is a lot of that project continues. Meta, who again, to recap for your audience that's just tuning in, we're saying that Meta is coming in to take on the excess capacity or the additional capacity that Oracle now no longer wants. They too have got projects all over the country. With different developers and their own teams building them. And so, you know, things move at different pace.